In the dusty corners of a quiet Nigerian town, where everyone seemed too busy to notice the forgotten, one woman chose to see what others ignored. Every morning, Amaka passed the same blind beggar on her way to work, a man who sat silently on a wooden bench with dark sunglasses, a cracked bowl, and a heart full of untold stories. Others walked past him as if he were invisible, but not Amaka. She gave him food when she barely had enough for herself. She offered him respect when the world treated him like dirt. And she never asked for anything in return. But what if the man she thought was helpless was watching her all along? What if behind those glasses was not just a pair of eyes but a secret worth billions? What happens next is a story of kindness, hidden tests, and a twist that will leave your heart pounding. Stay with us, because you won't believe what this so-called beggar says when he finally takes off his glasses. In the sweltering bustle of Lagos, where honking danfos and impatient traders defined the rhythm of daily life, most people walked fast and looked away. No one had time for sympathy. But not Amaka. Every morning, on her way to work at the tailoring shop, Amaka would stop by the side of Allen Avenue where a blind beggar sat quietly beneath an old mango tree. His name was Baba Sani. His faded kaftan barely shielded him from the dust and sun, and a pair of dark sunglasses concealed eyes that had long forgotten the gift of sight. Most passers-by ignored him, some even mocked him. But not her. Amaka, only 26, had little herself. She lived in a cramped room in Ajij with her younger brother, juggling sewing orders and late-night side gigs to keep both of them afloat after their parents passed away in a fire years ago. Still, she always made sure Baba Sani had something to eat. She brought him jollof rice in takeaway packs, small water sachets, and sometimes a few naira wrapped carefully in a tissue. "It's not much," she'd say, "but God sees everything." She'd stay and talk to him too, laugh about Lagos traffic, ask about his health, and pray with him on Fridays. Baba Sani would smile quietly, blessing her in Hausa and Yoruba. He rarely spoke much, but his presence was calming, his words always kind. People around her laughed behind her back. "Why waste your money on that man?" her co-worker once scoffed. "Get problem?" But Amaka shrugged. "If I ever become blind or poor tomorrow, I'd pray someone helps me too." Weeks turned into months and still Amaka's kindness didn't waver. Baba Sani became a silent part of her routine, like morning prayers and the hum of her sewing machine. One morning though, something was different. The tree was still there. The dust still swirled. But Baba Sani wasn't sitting cross-legged on his mat. He was standing tall. Amaka froze, confused. Before she could speak, he turned toward her, removed his sunglasses slowly, and for the first time opened his eyes, sharp, clear, and very much not blind. She stumbled back, heart pounding. "Baba, your eyes." He smiled gently, as if this moment had been waiting to happen all along. Then, in a calm, almost otherworldly tone, he said words that made her knees weak. "Amaka, I'm not a beggar. I'm a billionaire. And you have no idea why I've been here." The air around her seemed to still. Her mind spun. What was he talking about? Why would a rich man pretend to be poor and blind? But more pressing, what did he mean that she had no idea why he'd been there? This wasn't just a random twist. This was the beginning of a revelation that would flip Amaka's world upside down. Amaka stared at Baba Sani, if that was even his real name, as if he were a ghost. The man she had fed, prayed with, and pitied for months now stood with the posture of someone who had never begged for anything in his life. The dusty mat was still beneath him, but everything else had changed. The passers-by seemed to fade into the background as he gestured for her to sit beside him on the bench nearby. "I know this is confusing," he began, his voice still gentle, but now with the authority of someone used to being listened to. "My real name is Chief Adebayo Akinlalu. I own several companies across West Africa. But for the past 6 months I've been living here as a blind beggar, watching." "Watching what?" Amaka asked, still reeling, clutching her small purse like a lifeline. "People. Their hearts. Their motives. The way they treat those they think are beneath them." He paused, eyes scanning her face as if trying to read something deeper. "You, Amaka, are the only one who didn't see me as disposable. You never asked for anything. Not a job, not help, not even attention. You gave without expecting. And that is rare." Amaka's throat tightened. "Why would someone like you pretend to be poor?" Chief Adebayo's gaze turned somber. "Because wealth blinds people more than darkness ever could. I lost my only son years ago. He died of neglect, not from me but from people I trusted to take care of him while I was chasing success. After that, I stopped trusting money. I needed to know, could kindness survive without reward? Could someone still love us? Tears welled in Amaka's eyes, but she blinked them back. I didn't do anything special. He smiled. That's what makes it special. Suddenly, he pulled a small envelope from his robe and handed it to her. This is for you. Read it when you get home. Confused and still shaking, Amaka tucked it away and walked back to the tailoring shop, heart thumping louder than the machine she worked with. She opened the envelope that night with trembling fingers. Inside was a handwritten letter that read, You have been chosen. Meet me at the address below tomorrow morning. Come alone. Alongside it was a check, Nigerian naira 25 million naira, signed in her name. Amaka dropped the letter and screamed. Was this real? A hidden billionaire? A check in her name? But more than the money, it was the thought that kept her awake. What did he mean by chosen? The next morning, still dazed, Amaka left her brother asleep and took a kiki to the address, an estate so luxurious she almost turned back. She was led inside a mansion where Chief Adebayo waited. But he wasn't alone. A group of 10 others, men and women different ages all well-dressed, stood around him like an audience. Then he looked at her and said, Now your real journey begins, Amaka. The kindness you gave freely is about to shape lives you never imagined. And with those words, the true reason behind everything began to unfold. Amaka stood frozen in the marble-floored living room, overwhelmed by the elegance, the unfamiliar faces, and the surreal presence of Chief Adebayo. Everything felt like a dream she couldn't wake from. The other people in the room turned their attention to her with a mixture of respect and curiosity. Chief Adebayo motioned for her to sit. These people, he said, gesturing to the group, were once like you, helpers in the shadows. People who gave from their hearts without expecting anything. I found each of them the same way I found you, and now we're building something bigger. He explained how he had quietly created a foundation, one that didn't just throw money at problems but sought hearts to lead true change. He traveled across Nigeria in disguises, posing as a blind beggar, an old roadside seller, even a sick farmer, to find those rare few whose compassion wasn't performative or transactional. You passed the test most people fail, he said softly, eyes locked with hers. You gave because your soul knew it was the right thing to do. Amaka could hardly breathe. She wasn't a leader. She barely scraped enough each week to buy thread and needles. She looked down at her hands, calloused from sewing, marked by sacrifice. But why me? She asked, her voice breaking. Because you still ask that question, he replied. You're humble, and that's the kind of person the world needs. He then offered her something greater than money, a position as the coordinator of a women's empowerment initiative in rural communities, fully funded by his foundation. It came with a monthly salary beyond anything she had ever imagined, housing, and a mentorship program. Tears rolled down her cheeks. She thought about her late parents, her brother who had gone days without decent food, and all the nights she whispered prayers into the ceiling. Later that evening, as she sat in the estate guesthouse with the check still untouched in her bag, she thought back to the first day she gave Baba Sani, or Chief Adebayo, a simple meal. That act of kindness, insignificant to the world, had opened a door she never knew existed. She picked up her phone and called her brother. Hugo, she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion, our lives are about to change. But more than the wealth or position, what stayed with her was this truth. You never know who's watching when you do good. Not everyone you help is helpless. And sometimes the smallest kindness unlocks the greatest destinies. From that day forward, Amaka dedicated herself to helping the voiceless, remembering that the real reward of goodness wasn't fame or fortune, but legacy. A legacy built not in riches, but in hearts touched, lives lifted, and hope restored. True wealth is not measured by how much you have, but by how much you give, especially when no one is looking. In a world filled with pretenders and seekers of gain, be the person who gives simply because it's right. Kindness never returns empty. In a world where people often give only when they expect something back, Amaka gave from her heart. She didn't chase fame, money, or attention. She simply chose to care. And in doing so, she touched the life of a man who had everything, except faith and humanity. Her kindness became the key that unlocked not just wealth, but a purpose far greater than she ever dreamed of. So the next time you pass someone who seems small or broken, remember this. You never know who's behind the eyes you're ignoring. And you never know what doors your compassion might open. What would you have done if you were in Amaka's shoes? And do you believe kindness like hers still exists in today's world? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this story. And if this touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories like this. Because true wealth isn't in the wallet. It's in the heart.